Good afternoon. I'm Ryan Hill. Today we're going to talk about Lewis Howard Latimer. Uh, he did in a sundry of things, but what he's most known for is the filament in the light bulbs. You know, when you look in those light bulbs without a coil or filament in them, the light won't come on. So we're going to talk about him, but he did in a sundry of things, like I said. And we'll talk about it a draftsman, a patent consultant. Uh, he even taught English to immigrants and taught them how to write patents. You know, so we're talking about the turn of the century, 1900s. He was born in 1948. He died in 1928. He was an African American inventor and patent draftsman. His inventions included an evaporative air conditioner, so early precursor to the air conditioner, uh, an improved process for manufacturing carbon filaments for light bulbs, and an improved toilet system for railroad cars. They called it a water closet at the time. So he helped improve the bathrooms, the restrooms on the toilets. I'm sorry, on the railroads at the time, on the Amtraks, before Amtraks. Uh, in 1884, he joined the Edison Electric Light Company, where he worked, and this is Thomas Edison, where he worked as a draftsman and wrote the first book on electric lighting in 1884. The Lewis H. Latimer House, which is in Flushing, Queens, uh, is now been preserved, and they later moved his house from around the corner from its original site, but it's been preserved, excuse me, and it's an historical landmark. And it's in Queens, New York, along with some of the housing projects that were named after him and various schools we'll talk about as well in that Queens area. Latimer was born in Chelsea, Massachusetts in 1848. He was the youngest of four children by Rebecca and George Latimer. His parents escaped from slavery in Virginia and fled to Chelsea, Massachusetts in 1842. The day his father, George Latimer, arrived in Boston, his father, George, was recognized by a colleague of his former slave owner and arrested a few days later. So his dad gets in Boston and he's only there for a day, and he's recognized by a friend of his former slave master. Uh, and of course, he had a trial at the time. He tried to take him back to Virginia, but it was a highly publicized trial at the time. Uh, George Latimer's trial received great notoriety. He was represented by Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison, two of the top abolitionists at the time. William Lloyd Garrison, Caucasian, of course, Frederick Douglass, African American, but two of the top abolitionists at that time that were up in that New Bedford, Massachusetts area and Boston area. George Latimer was eventually able to purchase his freedom and live with his family in Chelsea, Massachusetts. When Latimer was young, he spent time helping his father in his barbershop. So father had a barbershop, and young Lewis also helped his dad with hanging wallpaper. When Lewis was 16, he joined the Navy in 1864. So he joined the Navy. That's before the end of the Civil War. He joined the Navy at 16, U.S. Navy, and served as a landsman on the USS Massasoit. Um, After receiving an honorable discharge from the U.S. Navy in 1865, he gained employment as an office boy with a patent law firm, Crosby, Halstead, and Gould, with a $3 per week salary. He learned how to use a set square, ruler, and other drafting tools. Later, after his boss recognized his talent for sketching patent drawings, Latimer was promoted to the position of head draftsman. Head draftsman earned $20 a week in 1872. Today, that would be $438.59 a week. So $20 back in 1872, $20 a week in 1872 would equal $438.59 today. Um, by today's standard. Lewis Latimer married Mary Wilson Lewis on November 15th, 1873, in Fall River, Massachusetts. Uh, in 1879, Latimer and his wife moved to Bridgeport, Connecticut, along with his mother, Rebecca, and Lewis's brother, William. They settled in a neighborhood called Little Liberia, and was called that because it was a area for freed blacks, like the Gum Springs area down in Alexandria, Route 1 area, where I'm from. So this was called Little Liberia. Inventions and technical work. In 1874, Lewis Latimer co-patented an improved toilet system like we talked about. They called it a water closet. So this is in 1874 for railroad cars. That's U.S. patent 147363. In 1876, Alexander Graham Bell employed Latimer, then a draftsman at Bell's patent law firm, to draft the necessary drawings required to receive a patent for Bell's telephone. So he had already been working on the water closet for the railroads or railway cars. And then in 1876, he's asked to draft the necessary drawings for the telephone. In 1879, he moved to Bridgeport, Connecticut, was hired as an assistant manager and draftsman for the U.S. Electric Lighting Company, a company owned by Hiram Maxim. At this time, Latimer was with three of the top people in that early electrical system: Hiram Maxim, Alexander Graham Bell, and of course, Thomas Edison. And he was an advisor and consultant and an employee of these three men, a top valued colleague. And Hiram Maxim, like we say, he was a rival of Thomas Edison. While Latimer was there, he invented a modification to the process for making carbon filaments, which aimed to reduce breakages during the carbonation process. And this is what we're talking about too, the filaments, an improved system for improving the carbonation process of carbon filaments. While in England on behalf of the Maxim Light Company, he taught the entire process for making Maxim lights, including glass blowing in 9 months in order to get the factory up and running. So he went over to England, helped the Maxim, one of Hiram Maxim's warehouses or companies, get up on with lights and teaching glass blowing in 9 months. So he's also a teacher of glass blowing in 9 months in order to get that factory up and running over in England. In 1884, he was invited to work with Thomas Edison. Along with the work he did with Edison, he was also responsible for translating data into German and French, as well as gathering that information. So like I said, this man did a sundry of things. He's not only teaching glass blowing for Hiram Maxim, now he's translating work for Edison, gathering the information first in a fairly new field with lighting and electricity, and then he's translating it into German and French. Lewis Latimer. Latimer also developed a forerunner of the air conditioner, early precursor for the air conditioner, called apparatus for cooling and disinfecting. In 1894, Latimer pursued a patent on a safety elevator, which prevented the riders from falling out and into the shaft. So now he's got a door, a slide down apparatus, whatever, to keep people from falling down into the shaft on the elevator. In 1924, after the Board of Patent Control dissolved Latimer, after the Board of Patent Control dissolved, Latimer went on to work with Hammer and Schwartz until he retired. Edison Pioneers. On February 11th, 1918, Latimer joined the Edison Pioneers. Lewis Latimer was the first person of color to join this group of 100. So he was the first person of color to join this group of 100 called the Edison Pioneers. Latimer received a patent on September 13th, 1881 for the electric lamp. A patent for the electric lamp in 1881, an improved design for producing light using electricity. And another on January 17th, 1882 for the process of manufacturing carbons, and those are those filaments. Uh, so the electric lamp in 1881 and 1882, the process of manufacturing carbons, an improved method for the production of carbon filaments for light bulbs. The Edison Electric Light Company in New York City hired Latimer in 1884 as a draftsman and an expert witness in patent litigation on electric lights. So he was a head draftsman and an expert witness in patent litigation. He taught many companies he consulted people on how to write proper and appropriate, accurate, thorough patents too on inventions. While he was working for Edison, Latimer wrote the first book on electric lighting we talked about, entitled Incandescent Electric Lighting in 1890, and supervised the installation of public electric lights throughout New York, Philadelphia, Montreal, and London. So he wrote the first book on electric lighting entitled Incandescent Electric Lighting in 1890, and then he supervised the installation. This man supervised the installation of public electric lights throughout the cities of New York, Philadelphia, Montreal, and London. So he's supervising, make sure these lights are bright enough, burn long enough. He's supervising the lightings in these four major cities. When that company was combined in 1892 with the Thomson-Houston Electric Company to form General Electric, he continued to work in the legal department. So the Electric Lighting Company formed with the Thomson-Houston Electric Company to form GE. We all know about GE, General Electric today. In 1911, he became a patent consultant to law firms. And again, these are some of his patents. Improvement in water closet, which we talked about. They called restrooms water closets at the time. That was 1874. Improvement in water closets for railroad cars. So a better bathroom on the railroad cars. The electric lamp in 1881. The process for manufacturing carbons, 1882. Supporter for electric lamps, 1882. Apparatus for cooling and disinfecting and air purification, which was a precursor to today's air conditioning, 1886. A locking rack for hats, coats, and umbrellas, 1896. A book supporter. You got a stack of books, even your book in. He'd read so many and wrote so many, he needed a book supporter. Lamp fixture, lamp shade, 1910. Military, we talked about him being honorably discharged, a veteran from the U.S. Navy in 1865, serving in the Civil War on the USS Massasoit. Even though Latter was no longer active military, he remained patriotic. He was an early and active member in the Veterans Organization, the Grand Army of the Republic. He acted as secretary and adjutant. And he had various interests as well. He wrote a book of poetry called Poems of Love and Life. So you're talking about a Renaissance man as well. I mean, a book of poetry called Poems of Love and Life, a technical book, Incandescent Electric Lighting, which we talked about, the first book written on electricity, various pieces for African American journals, a petition to Mayor Seth Low, who was the mayor at that time in Brooklyn, to restore a member to the Brooklyn School Board. I guess a member had been removed, so he was advocating for others in the community as well. He knew this gentleman could serve well on the school board, so he advocated and sent a petition to the Mayor Seth Low at the time, to get this gentleman back onto the school board. Latimer played the violin and flute as well. He painted portraits, and he wrote plays. My goodness, he wrote poems. He played the violin and the flute, painted portraits, and wrote plays. He was an early advocate of civil rights. In 1895, Lewis wrote a statement in connection with the National Conference of Colored Men about equality, security, and opportunity. This was in 1895. A statement in connection with the National Conference of Colored Men about equality, security, and opportunity. Latimer, as I mentioned earlier, he taught English and drafting courses to immigrants at the Henry Street settlement in New York at the time. So he's teaching English as well and drafting courses. So instrumental because immigrants coming to this country didn't know the language. European immigrants, uh, Caribbean immigrants, uh, so teaching them the language was vital, and then he taught them a trade, a skill. So they're learning the language at the same time and being taught how to draft patents, drafting courses for immigrants, for patents. So instrumental and so helpful what he did around the community and around the world. For 25 years, from 1903 until his death in 1928, Latimer lived with his family in a home on Holly Avenue in what is now known as East Flushing section of Queens. Latimer died on December 11th, 1928, at the age of 80. Approximately 60 years after his death, his home was moved from Holly Avenue, as we talked about earlier, to 137th Street in Flushing, Queens, which is about 1.4 miles northwest of its original location. And they moved it to help to be able to restore it and to refurbish it. Just some more quotes and accomplishments of Mr. Latimer. Real quick, Latimer is an inductee of the National Inventors Hall of Fame for his work on electric filament manufacturing techniques. So he's in the Hall of Fame for his work on electric filament manufacturing techniques. The Latimer family house is on Latimer Place in Flushing, Queens. It was moved from its original location to a nearby small park and turned into a Lewis H. Latimer House Museum in honor of the inventor. So we talked about being moved from its original location to a small park, which was a bigger area to give it a bigger land, a bigger yard, and make it more attractive and help and also help with its restoration by moving it as well. Latimer was a founding member of the Flushing, New York Unitarian Church as well. A set of apartment houses in Flushing are called Latimer Gardens to this day. PS 56 in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn is named Public School 56 in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn is named Lewis H. Latimer School today. An invention program at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, is named after them. So he has an invention program named after them at MIT, named after him at MIT. On May 10th, 1968, a school in Brooklyn, New York was rededicated and called the Lewis H. Latimer School in his memory. In 1988, a committee was formed, the Lewis H. Latimer Committee, in order to save his home in Flushing, New York, like we talked about. And I hope to visit that one day. So the next time I'm up that way, I know Flushing, I always knew Flushing for Shea Stadium, where the Jets used to play. But I hope to visit that, and I will visit the next time I'm up that way, Brooklyn, Queens way. We'll visit the Lewis H. Latimer home. But in 1988, a committee was formed, the Lewis H. Latimer Committee, in order to save his home in Flushing, New York. Lewis Latimer has been honored through Chandler White, which publishes Black inventions on African American and other ethnic inventors history. So Chandler White publishes and prints out other blacks as well as other minority inventors and their accomplishments. His electric filament invention in the light bulb made it to #1 on a Black Inventions poster. Chandler published. It is being used for Black History Month in schools, and it's no wonder why I made it to #1. His electric filament invention. That's why I was talking about him today. Of course, the early air conditioning, improved restroom in the railroad car, electric lamp. Of course, those are all great inventions. His work with patents, uh, you know, overseeing patents, overseeing lighting processes in major countries, major cities like we talked about, Montreal, New York, Philadelphia. But it's those filaments in the light bulb that are so instrumental because we all know if you don't, you can't, a light won't come on unless those coils and filaments are in that light. When you look in a light bulb and you see those coils, those filaments, if there's no coils or filaments, or if they don't work, the light will not come on. So his electric filament invention in the light bulb would make it the number one. There's no light without his invention. So again, I'm here to talk about Mr. Lewis Latimer. It was my pleasure. We'll see you next time on our next Black Inventor series. Have a good evening.